Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. So this is a complete beginner video, and in this video we're going to be building out a movie search application. So we're going to be using plain vanilla JavaScript, and for the styling we are going to be using Tailwind CSS. So by the end of this video you should, for one, have a complete project, and two, you would learn how you can traverse the DOM using JavaScript. So also data fetching, because we're going to be fetching data and we are going to be displaying on our HTML. So you would learn how to link your different JavaScript pages with your HTML page, and then how you can dynamically render data that is being gotten from an outside API into your HTML. So let me give you a brief demo and then let's get started building the project. Okay everyone, for our movie application we have the header over here with a list of dummy data, and then we have the background image, and then we have categories. So these categories is where things get interesting. Over here we're going to be fetching dynamic data, and these are all data coming from the API. They are not hard coded. So if we go on to filter by animation movies and we click on explore, you can see that we have the different, or we fetch the different animation movies that we have. And if you click on one of the movies here, it takes you to the movie detail page where you can see the name of the movie image, and a description about the movie. So all these here are just dummy data. If you click on the watch now, you just see a modal that will pop up, and then you have a default or a dummy YouTube link over there. So you can obviously come to adventure, click on explore, and you list out, you'd see a list of all adventure movies, and you know, it's the same when you go to the movie detail page. So this is our movie application. Without wasting much time, let's get started building out our application. Okay, so getting started in building our movie application, I'm going to create a folder on my desktop. I'll right click and create a new folder, and I'm going to call this movie search app. And to open this application, I'm going to drag and drop this into my Visual Studio Code. So we have this. Let's go on to create our index.html. So I'm going to create a new file called index.html. And for our boilerplate HTML, I'm just going to use, shift and hold 1 to get this exclamation mark. And then I'm going to hit it. So this is going to give us a boilerplate HTML structure. For the title, we can change it to movie search. And we're going to be using Tailwind CSS for the styling. So let's go on to import Tailwind CSS inside our head tag. So below the title, I'm going to use the shortcut, and I'm going to link to CSS. So this is going to have a rel of style sheet, but the href now is not going to point to a CSS file because we don't actually, we're not going to be writing our own custom CSS. So it's going to be pointing to Tailwind CSS CDN. So I'm just going to take the CDN link and I'm going to drop it over here. So this is the href, and this link points to Tailwind CSS. Okay, at version 2.1.4. Next off, let's get started by building up our header. I'm going to have the header tag, and our header, we're going to have a div that's going to have the link to our logo and also some navigation and maybe a search input. Let's give the header a background color. So I'm going to give it a class of BG gray 900 PY4 to have some padding on the y-axis, and PX2 to also have some padding on the x-axis. So inside the header, we're going to have a div. And in this div is going to be our container. So our container for the logo, our navigation menu, and the sign up button. We're going to give this div a container class. Also MX Auto, display it as flex wrap, justify between, and item center. Okay, so this is for our container div, and inside the container div, we're going to have our logo. Okay, we're going to have our logo. We're also going to have our navigation, and we are also going to have a search. So for our logo, I'm just going to put this over here for the logo. So we're going to have a link with these class names and an image that links to Unsplash. So this is going to give us a random image, an alt tag of logo, some classes, and the title of movie search. So this is for our logo. And after our logo, we're also going to have our navigation items. Okay, these are dummy items. We're not actually going to have links for them. So this is going to have these classes, and inside the navigation, we're going to have a URL and some list items that points to nowhere. So home, movie, TV shows, and also my list. And the next up, we're going to have a search input. Okay, and this search input is going to be inside a div like this. So inside this div, we're going to have this input. We're going to have a button that says sign in. So obviously this sign in button, and also this, for now they don't do anything. So I'm going to save, and let's have a preview for what we have. I'm going to be using live server extension. So you can get that by going to the extensions marketplace and searching for live server. So this live server over here, you can go on to install. I already have it installed, and it's going to give you this go live link that you can use to preview your application. So I'm going to click on it now to go live. It's going to give us start application on port 5500. Okay, it did open up, but it opened up on my other screen. So I'm just going to bring it over here. Okay, and make this full screen. So this is what we have. We have our logo, and we also have our navigation, so home menu, and then we have a search and a sign in button. And this should also be responsive. So this is what we have going on at the moment. So up next, let's go back to our application, and after this we are going to be building the section. So we're going to build a section where we're going to have more like a hero section. Okay, so after our header, we're going to have our hero section. So you can mark it like this, hero section. And this hero section is going to, we're going to build it up with a section tag. We're going to give it a gray background. This background we might not use because we intend to use an image that is going to take the full width and also the full height of the screens. But in case the image doesn't load, let's give it a gray background, okay, as an alternative. So we have this, and inside here we're going to have a div of class container mxauto flex item center and position relative. So this is going to be the div, and inside this div we are first going to have our image. So this is going to act as a banner, and this image is also linking to Unsplash. So it's just going to give us a more like random banners whenever I reload the page. It's going to take the full width, that is 100% VH and VW, and 100% VH with an object of cover. So this is for our image, and inside our image we are going to have just like a background that is going to help reduce the opacity of this image. Okay, and this is it here. So this is going to be positioned absolute. Remember that we gave the surrounding div a position of relative, so this is going to be positioned relative to this div we have over here. And the main function of this div is to have a black background and an opacity of 50, so that we can have that kind of cover above this image. Okay, and then we're going to have some text, and this text too are going to be positioned relative or absolute, that is relative to this div over here. So we are going to have this. So watch anytime, anywhere, and we're going to have this description and a call to action button that says join now. Obviously, all these are dummy data and they're not actually going to work. We are soon going to enter into the world of dynamic data, where we're going to be fetching and rendering data onto the screen. But for now, we're just going to be using the world of dummy data. And if we have a preview, this is what we get. So we have this, which is 100 VH, and then we have this caption. And if let's go on to reload the page, and we can see we have a new movie whenever we reload the page. So this is what we have going. Next, let's go back to our application, and let's collapse this. So this is our header, and this is our hero section. So we're going to have our categories section. In our category section, we are going to render a list of categories. For now, these are going to be dummy data, but later on, we are going to be fetching this data from the back, not really from the back end, but from an API endpoint, and we're going to render them onto the screen. Okay, so this is also going to be coming from a section tag. And inside this section, let's give it some classes. I'm going to give it a PY of 200 for having some padding. Sorry, a PY of 20. And we're going to give it a gray background. So BG gray of 100. Okay, and inside this section, we are also going to have a div. A div of container. And MX auto. Okay, and inside this div, we are going to have our heading. Okay, so inside the div, we're going to have our heading. That would just say popular categories. So we can go back and have a preview. And this is what we have at the moment. So popular categories. Let's go back to application. And after that, we're going to have another div. And this div is going to wrap our different cards. So we're going to have our category cards, but first we're going to have this div over here, and this div is going to wrap our different categories card. Okay, so we're going to call this have our category card over here, and this category card is just going to contain some information about the different categories that we will be having in the application. So we have this div, and then we have this image, which is more like the category image. We're also going to have this div, just as we had previously for our hero section, which is just going to provide an overlay around the category card. And then we're going to have this other div, which is going to give us a heading, so the title of the category, and also a button, a call to action button. So we can save this, and let's have a preview. So these are the different categories card. Let's go back to our application. In the application, you can see over here in this container, we are using the grid layout. And on smaller devices, this is going to have 1 column. On medium devices, we're going to have 2 columns. And on large devices, we're going to have 4 columns. And this is also going to give them a gap of 8. So what we can do, we can come here and make copies of this grid card. So I just made 4 copies. I'm going to save, but let me collapse them so we have more space. So I'm just going to collapse. So we have now 4 category cards. I'm going to save this and come back to application. We have the same category cards, obviously repeating themselves, but we're going to get into the world of dynamic data in a while. And if we go on to check, we can see that this also is responsive. Okay, let's reload this. You can see that this is responsive. We have our popular categories, and these are our different categories. Okay, so coming back to our application, next up, after this our category section, we are also going to have another section. Okay, and this section is going to be more like where we have our new releases. Okay, so we're going to have new movies and stuff like that. This is going to be static data. We're not going to display some dynamic data, for new releases, but at the end of this tutorial, you should have learned enough to implement this if you wish to. Okay, so we're going to have a section for new releases. And in this new releases section, we're going to have a section tag with just a PY of 20, so we can have some padding on the y-axis. We're also going to have a div, so we can just go with dots and give it container, and also MX auto. Okay, so this gives us the div, and then we're going to have a h2 that is just going to say new releases like this. And after this h2, we are now going to have the layout. that is going to have our different cards. Okay, so this layout is going to be a div that we're going to display as a grid. We're also going to, on smaller devices, we're going to go with grid equals 1. On medium devices, so we'll go like this, MD, we're going to have grid equals 2, and we're going to give it a gap of 8. So this is what we have. Okay, and inside here we're going to have our different cards. Okay, so we're going to have our different cards over here. So we have this, which is going to be our card, and we can go on to make copies of it. And let me walk us through the card that we just have now. Okay, so in this card we're displaying it as flex items. We have an image, and then we also have a div, and this div contains the title, some description, and a call to action button. We're going to save this, have a preview, and then we have these new releases over here. Okay, so these are dummy data, and we would not actually be making this dynamic. Okay, we would just work on the categories and the movies page. And to wrap this off so that we can go into the interesting part of our application, let me collapse the new releases section. The next section we are going to have is more like top picks section. Okay, so top picks like this. Okay, and this section is also going to be the section tag py20, and then we also have our container, and our container we're also going to give mx auto, and after that we have our h2 that would say top picks, and inside this top picks we are going to have a grid just as we had before that is going to help us to lay out our different cards. So we're going to have this div, which is going to be laid out as a grid core 1. On medium devices we're going to go with 3 columns, so grid calls 3, and going to give it a gap of 8. So inside here we're going to display our card. So I'm just going to drop our card over here. So we have our card, which has a class of flex. We have our image, we have our heading, description, and a call to action button. So I would go on to make copies of this card, and let's have a preview. Now we have our topic. So this is what we have, and let's wrap this off by adding a footer. Okay, so I'm going to have a footer, and I'm going to collapse all of these. So from here I'm going to collapse all of these static data. Up next we have our footer, and for our footer I'm just going to drop this in here. So this is dummy data. We have our footer, and inside our footer we have a div, and then we have another div, and inside the div we have one div which covers our image and some copyright quotes. Then we have our links over here. After our links we have our social media links. So we can go on to save this and have a preview. So this is what we have. So we have been able to build out the homepage of our movie application. Up next we're going to go into the world of dynamic data. So we're going to focus more on our category section. The first thing I want us to do now is to go on, and if we visit our code, we can see that in our category section, these are all dummy data that we are coding here. So we need to move away from the world of dummy data and go on to render dynamic data on the screen. So we're going to be fetching some data. I'm going to open our tabs, and I'm going to create a new file which I'll call main.js. We have our main.js, and we want to link this main.js to our index.html. Coming to our index.html, I'm going to use the script tag, and this script tag is going to have a source, and this source is going to point to our main.js file. And we should add a keyword, the defer keyword. This defer keyword is going to make sure that our script is downloaded in the background while the HTML is being passed. So while passing the HTML, our scripts are also going to be downloaded in the background. I'm going to save this, and to be sure that we have successfully linked our JavaScript to our index.html, I'm just going to log to the console movie search. I'm going to save this, go back to our application, open up the console, and I'm going to see movie search over there. Nice. So now we have that. We are sure that our HTML has been linked to our JavaScript. The next thing we're going to do, we need to fetch our categories from the movie database API. Okay, so we're going to fetch our categories from the movie database API. Okay, let's just the movie database API. And once we fetch these categories, we need to create a category card just as we have in our HTML. So we're going to create our category card. After creating category card, we now need to display the different categories onto the screen. So the next we're going to do is going to display categories. So let's get started. And in order for us to make a request to the movie API and fetch a list of categories, we need to be signed up to the movie database. So I'm going to collapse this, and I'm going to bring this over here. So this is the movie database. You need to go on and sign up to this database, and you'll have access to an API key. Now, it's important that I say from the beginning that in a real application, you would not be exposing your API key on the client. Most likely, you would have a back end where you would be fetching data and you'll be sending the response to the front end. Okay, so in every application you build, you don't want to be exposing your API keys to the client. You always want to have a safe place to store, and most likely you would have a back end where you're going to be fetching data and it's going to send the response. You would not be directly sending, like we have this example API request, we would not be directly making this API request on the client because it exposes our API key. We would be using a backend to send this request. We are going to be sending back the response of this request to the client, and the client will display the necessary data. Now, this is a dummy application, and that's why I would go ahead to be exposing the API key on the client. But if this were to be a real application, you would not want to expose secret keys like this on the front end, okay? So with that being said, you can come to this themoviedatabase.org, go over there and sign up, and if you come to /settings/API, you would see an API key, and all through the application, we are going to be needing this API key in order for us to send requests to the movie API and authenticate ourselves with their API. Okay, so with that being said, you can take some time, pause the video, sign up, and have access to the API key because we will be needing it now. And talking about that, I'm just going to come over here and create a const which I'll call API key. And this API key is going to be equal to a string, which is going to be equal to my own API key. And after this, we need the endpoint, and the endpoint that we would be sending data to fetch a list of categories from the movie data API is this. So category endpoint, this is the category endpoint, https API themoviedb.org/3 genre movie list, and then we have a query param for the API key. Okay, so this is the endpoint, and next now we need to go on to fetch our categories. Okay, so I'm just going to move these two up because they are constants. They're not actually fetching the categories. So in fetching the categories, let's define an async function, and this function we are going to call fetch categories, like this, and we're going to be using a try catch block. So try catch. In our try block, we're going to send the request by awaiting fetch because this is an async operation. It's a promise, it's going to take some time, and it needs a URL, and the URL is going to be our category endpoint. Now this returns a promise and it's going to give us our data. So let's go on to store that in a response property, in a response variable. Now we have our response. Next, we are going to also get the data, which is going to be equal to await response.json. This is just the way the fetch API works, that you have to also await response.json in order for you to get your actual data. Now let's be sure that we are actually doing the right things, and we're going to log to the console our data over here to see what we have. I'm going to save this, come back to application, open the console, and if we see for our data, let's reload, we don't actually see our request sent, and that makes sense because we're not really calling the function. So I'm going to come back to application, and we need to call our fetch category function. I'm going to come over here and call the function like this. I'm going to save, go back to the console, and then we see our data. So our data is going to give us a list, an array of 19 elements, and we're going to display these onto the screen and be replacing the dummy categories that we have over here. So I'm going to go back to application, and we need to transform our data. And in order for us to transform our data, we need to use the map. Okay, so we're going to say our data dot generate, as we saw, dot map. And map is going to loop through each individual list that we have, and we're going to be able to transform. Okay, so when we need to return, in order for us to return an object, we're going to use parentheses, and we're going to put the object's sign over here. So this means we are going to return an object. Okay, but without this parentheses, it's actually going to mean that this is the actual function body. Okay, but with the parentheses, it means that we are returning an object, and we want to return an object with an ID, which is going to be the join ID. We are also going to return a name, which is going to be the join.name, and we are also going to return the image URL. And for this image URL, we are actually not going to be using a URL that is being returned from here, because if we see, we just have an ID and a name, but we also need an image for us to display on the screen. So I'm just going to be using PicsSum. So PicsSum is where you can get free images for your website. I'm going to be using PicsSum, and for the name, we're going to be passing the join name inside here. So this is going to give us a list or an image, okay, that we'll be able to return. And this map returns data. So we are going to store that data into our categories variable, and we need to return the categories at the end. So we're going to return categories, but we don't want to return the whole categories. We just want to display 4 onto the screen. So we're going to call slice on it, and we're going to slice from 0 to 4. So we're going to start at the 0th index up to the 4th index. Okay, and I'm going to save this, and let's log. So saving this, we have our categories, we are calling this. Let's log this to the console to be sure that we have been able to successfully transform our data. So coming back to our browser, we have an array of 4 elements. So this is the 4 elements, and these are the different image URL. So we have been able to successfully fetch our data from the movie database. We need to, up next, go on and create our category card. Okay, in order for us to create our category card, we are trying to mock what we have in our index.html. So if we come over to our category section, I'm going to, for now, delete these other categories, because what we're going to do, or what we intend doing, we intend displaying dynamic categories onto the screen. So if we go back to application, we should have just one category at this point. Yes, we do. And now we need to construct this category card, but we need to do that in HTML. So I'm going to copy this for now. So let's go on and copy this category card, and here where we need to create our category card, I'm just going to paste it over here. this is what we actually need to do. Okay, so I'm going to comment this, and then we can keep it for reference. So what we need here, we need a div, with relative class. We need this image with this source and also with an alt tag. So this source over here is going to be replaced by this image URL. We need an alt tag, so the category name can replace the alt tag, and we need these classes. So creating this category card in HTML, in JavaScript, we need to create an element. So we need to create this element over here, this surrounding div, and we're going to do that by calling it a category card. So category card is going to be document.createElement. We're going to create element, and it needs the tag name, and the tag name is going to be a div. So we're going to create a div, and this represents this div over here. And inside this div, it has a class name of relative. So we're going to call it category card dot class name. You have class list, but class list means you to pass a list of classes separated by comma. So this is not what we intend doing. So we are going to go with class name instead. So class name, and the class name we are going to give is going to be equal to relative. So now we have been able to successfully create this div and also give it a class name. And the next thing now is for us to create this image, give it the source, the alt, and also this class. So coming next, we are going to const. We're going to define a const which we would call category image. Category image is also going to be equal to document.createElement, and the element we are going to create is going to be an image. Now we have created an image, we need to give it a class name. Okay, so we're going to call category image dot, so we can obviously use the class name, but let me show us how to use the class list. So we're going to click with class list, and in class list we now have dot add, and the add, we can now add the class name. So inside this we want to add this, so with full, and then we separate it by comma, and the next class we're going to add is HAuto. So we're going to be adding these class names, and the next is going to be rounded LG, and lastly we are going to add shadow LG. So we have been able to create this image, give it a class name. Next we need to give it a source attribute. So we're going to call the category image dot src, and the source is going to be equal to this. Okay, so we're going to copy this and we're going to paste this here. Since we are creating this for category, we are going to be replacing this with our category ID. Remember that over here we created a category ID. So what we're going to do, I'm going to cut this using Ctrl X or Command X, and I'm going to create a function instead. Okay, so I'm going to create a function that I'll call create category card, and this function, as the name says, is going to create a category card and it's going to receive the category as an input, and then we can paste this. So over here we're going to replace this with our category.id. So after the source we also need an alt tag, so we're going to call the category image, and we're going to call the alt, and the alt is now going to be equal to the category, this category that we receive from here as an input, dot name. So we intend to give it this name over here. Okay, so now we're done with the category name, we are done with this image, and if you can see, this image is appended to this div. So this image is inside this div over here. So up next we're going to call our category card, which is this div, and then we're going to append the child, and the child we're going to append is our category image. So this gives rise to the image. After this we need to move on to creating this div over here. So ahead of time we can copy this class name, and inside the function I'm going to create a const, and I'm going to call this category card background is going to be equal to document dot create element, and this element is going to be div. Okay, and this background, next let's give it the class names that it has. So I'm going to call category card background, and I'll just use the class name. It's going to be equal to this. Next, we have this background, and this background is inside this div, so we need to append. I'm going to copy this line. So we have our category card, we need to append a child, and the child is going to be our category card background. After this, we need to move on to this. So now we have another div here, and this div has the heading, a button, and a button. So we need to have another div. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to call this category card content. So I'm going to create a const. We'll call category card content. And this category card content is going to be document.createElement. We'll be creating a div. And after creating a div, which is this, we are going to give it a class name. Okay. So we have our category card content dot class name. And the class name is going to be equal to this. So now we have the class name. We need to create our category name, that is this, and also our button. But I'm going to create a const, which we are going to call category card name. And this category card name, let's see what we have, is a h3. So we're going to call our document, and we're going to create our element, and the element we're going to create is our h3 element. So next, we are going to do what we've done before. We're going to call the category card name, and we're going to give it a class name, and the class name is going to be equal to this class name that we have over here. So it's going to be equal to this. Now after that, it has a text content, so we're going to call our category card name, and we're going to say dot text content. So the text content is going to be each category name. Remember that we received the category as input in this function, so we're going to call our category dot name. So that is us dynamically having the category name over there. Okay, so after that, we need to create our button. So I'm going to call a const category card button, category card button, btn for short. Is also going to be document.createElement, and we're going to be creating a button. And after creating a button, the next thing we're going to do is to give it the class names. So category card button dot class name, and class name is going to be equal to this string over here. So I'm going to paste this over here. So this gives us our button. After creating our button, we need to also give it the text content to be explored. So we're going to have our category card button. So category card button, we're going to have the text content to be equal to explore. This should be a string, obviously. So it's going to be equal to the string of explore. Now we need to add an event listener to this button, because the intention is whenever we click to this button, we want to link it to a certain category in our application. So we're going to have our category card button, category we're going to have our category card button, and then we need to add an event listener. So we're going to add an event listener, and this event listener is going to be what type of event. So we're going to listen to the click event, and then we need a function, which is going to be a listener, a function that's going to be executed once this button is clicked. And we're going to define an arrow function, and this function is just going to help us to change the window location. So we're going to say window dot location dot href, And the href now is going to point to a category page, a category file. For now we don't have, but that's the intention. So we're going to link to /category .html, but then we need to also pass some other information to the URL. So we're going to add a query parameter, and we're going to say the category ID is going to be equal to, and then we're going to add dynamic data, which is going to be the category that this function receives .id. Okay, and why are we doing this? We are doing this because once we link to the category page, we need to send some requests to the backend, to the movie database, and fetch some movies that are linked to that category. So we're going to be reading off the category ID from the URL. So this is next we're going to also attach our category. So as the category name, and the category is also going to be equal to the category dot name. So now we have the category name, and the next we're going to do, after defining our category button and category card name, we have the content, which is this div over here. We need to append the name and the button to this div. Okay, so coming down here, let's see, we have our function. Coming down here, we are going to say our category card content dot append child. We would need to add our category card name, and we also need to add our category card button. So now we're done with this. We have defined this div over here. Okay, we have defined this, and we have also defined our image. Now we need to append our category card content also, as we did, because we have appended our image. As you can see over here, our image and also our background has been attached to our category card, which is the same thing going on here, our image and our background. So next we need to append this content to our category card. So I'm going to come down here, and our category card, I'm going to append child, and the child we're going to append is our category card content, like this. So now we are done creating the card, we need to return it. So we're going to return our category card. So this function, we now have a function that creates our category card. Okay, so we can for now stop calling the fetch category function. So after creating our card, I'm going to take this off. The next thing we're going to do is to display our different categories to the DOM. And we need to have access to the underlining DOM element where we want to display our different categories. So I'm going to come back to our index.html, and our index.html, we want to be able to attach our different category card to this div over here. And in order for us to be able to attach our different categories to this div, we need to be able to have access to this div in our JavaScript file. So I'm going to have access to it by defining, or by giving it an ID. I'm going to give it an ID of categories. Okay, so now we have access to this div over here. We can also go on to remove this card. So we can also go on to remove this. So in our category section, we only have this div over here. So now we need to get access to this div, and one way we can do that in JavaScript is by coming over here, and we can define a const that we can call category card container or categories container. And this category container, we can have access to it by using the document. So you can say document dot, we can say get element by ID, and give it an ID, and the ID has to match. So it has to match these categories over here. So alternatively, if you don't want to use get element by ID, we also have get elements by class name, and get elements by class name is going to give you a collection of elements that has that specific class name. So it's going to give you a list. Okay, we also have get elements by tag name, and get element by tag name is going to give you a collection of elements that has the same tag name. We also have query selector. Query selector is going to give you the first element, that matches that specific CSS selector. We also have query selector all. So those are the different ways that we have of getting access to the underlying DOM element. But now we've gotten access to our categories container, we need to go on to display our categories. Okay, so now let's go on to have a function that is going to help us do that. So we're going to have a function that we can call display categories, and this function, like this, first we need to fetch our categories. Okay, so we already have a function called fetch categories, so I'm going to call const, and we need to give it a name of categories. So categories is going to be equal to await fetch categories, like this. So we are awaiting this, and up next we can map. So we're going to have the different categories, so we can map through them. So we can say categories dot map, or let's use for each. So we can say for each. So for each category, we need to do something, and we can do something by first creating our category card. So we're going to have a const where we say our category card is now equal to, we are going to use our create category card, which returns the category card that we have created. So create category card, and it needs what? A category. So we're going to pass this category that we are getting from this map over here. So after getting our category card, we now need to append the different cards to this div. So we're going to append it to this div that we had over here, which is more like what we had before, where we had the different categories card. So that's what we're trying to replicate. So we need to append them to this div, and we have access to it using this categories container. So we're going to say categories container dot append child, and we're going to append our category card like this. So let's not forget categories. Yeah. So let's not forget to call our display categories function. So I'm going to call this function over here. So let's have a quick recap. We have first a function that fetches our data from the backend API, which is this function. We also have a function that creates our category card, which is this function, and I've walked us through how we're able to create it. And next we have a function that displays the categories. So it fetches the categories, it loops through the category, and for each category it creates a category card, and it appends that created card onto our HTML. So if we save this and we go back to application, we have our different categories. So let's see, if we click on these different categories, you see that we go we have the category ID, and we also have the category name. So when we are working later on, we are going to be needing those information to display the different categories onto our document. Okay, so let's go up next. We have been able to dynamically fetch our data. As you can see in our index.html, it makes our code much more lean. We just have this category section, and you can see other sections are way bigger because we are replicating the different cards. So as an exercise, you can go on to do what we just did in the main.js. You can go on to render dynamic data for the new releases and also for the top picks, okay, and display it onto the screen. But we will just be doing for the categories section. So I think for now you have an idea. So up next, let's go on to create this page. So go back to our application. If we click on one of these links, we are directed to our category.html. So let's go on to create our category page. So over here, I'm going to create a category.html file. So let me collapse this. Now category.html exclamation mark, and this gives us the boilerplate. So we can call this category page. So we also need to import Tailwind CSS. I'm going to come over to our index.html and I'm going to copy, maybe I'll just copy this link, okay? Or maybe I copied it too. So I'm going to paste this over here. So for this, we don't obviously need to link to our main.js. We are going to have a category.js file that we'll be linking to. So this is the boilerplate setup for our category.html page. If we go back to our application and we load our page, if we try to finish to go to one of these links, we have our category page, but for now we don't have anything there, but we see the title, which is category page, being displayed onto the screen. So the idea for the category page is to go on and display the list of category. So we're going to have our category details section, and in this section I'm just going to take this section over here and I'm going to display this section. Okay, so we have the section with this background URL. Okay, you're going to be using inline styling just to have this background URL over here. And after that, we also need our div container. Okay, just as we had also in our home page, we are going to have our div container over here. Okay, so inside our div container, we are also going to have a wrapping div, and this wrapping div is going to help us wrap our h2 elements and some other content. So I'm going to paste this here. This is our wrapping div, and inside this wrapping div, we are going to have the name of our category, which is going to be called category title. So I'm going to paste this over here and have our category. You can just call it action movie by default. So we have our section with the styling and with this class. Then we have a div, and inside this div we have our h2 for our title, and then we also need some description. So this is going to be our description, and after our description we need to have a wrapping div, and this div is going to help us wrap our different card. So for a different category image tag, we're going to have this, and we can go on to repeat this. Obviously this is going to be replaced with dynamic data as we've done in the past. So I'm going to save this, go back to our application, and this is what we have. So we have this image background and we have these different movies. Okay, so let's do what we did before. Let's go on to fetch some data and display onto our application. So I'm going to undo, and we're just going to have one card for our reference. So I'm going to save this, and we have our title. So let's get started, and in our file here we're going to create our JavaScript file for our category. So this is going to be our category.js file. So this is going to be our category.js file, and inside our category.js file we also need to have our API key. So I'm going to take our API key from our main.js. We need our key, so I'm going to copy this and I'm going to display over here. After our category key, we need our category ID, and we also need our category name. Okay, so to get our category ID, I'm just going to call this const category ID. Category ID is going to be equal to window.location.href. So window.location.href, let's go on to log it to the console. So category ID. Okay, and apart from category ID, we also need our category name. Okay, so we can go on to category name is also going to be window.location.href. So let's go on and log our category title and also our category name onto the screen in our console. So I'm going to come back, and we can see we have our URL as our category title, and also as our category ID, and also our name. So we need to split this. So we need to split this by CID equals, okay? And this was what we defined in our main.js. So we need to split by this, so that we're trying to fetch this category ID, and we're also trying to fetch the category name, okay? So we need to split this by CID, and then we take the second element, or sorry, the second element in the console, in the returned array, and this, we're also going to split this. We're going to split this by category equals to, like this. So, and we're going to take the first element onto the screen. So we're going to save this, and let's see what we have. So we have this. So we have our category name already sorted out. And as you can see, for our category ID, we still have this. So we still need to split again. So we're going to come back to application, and for our category ID, we're going to split. We're going to split it by the and then we're going to take the first element. So moving back to application, we now have 16, and then we have animation. So we have the category ID and also the category name. So we can go on to first replace this action, which is hard-coded, to dynamic data. So coming back to application. Okay, so I'm going to take this off. Let's have access to our category title. So if we come to our HTML, we can see that we have our title, and it has this ID of category title. Okay, so we can go on to get the element by ID, and we can call it category title. So this gives us our category title container, and now we have our category title container. Let's go on to set the text content. So we're going to say our category title container dot text content, as we've seen before, is going to be equal to category name, and then we have the movies. So we can come back to our category HTML and take this off. So we are setting this in JavaScript, so it can just be empty. Come back to our JavaScript and we save it. Let's go back to visit our application. And now we have animation movies. So if we go back and we come over to comedy, we should have comedy movies onto the screen. Nice. If we go back and we try to visit adventure, we have our adventure movies onto the screen. So that's done. Let's go up next, and the next thing we want to do, we want to go on and fetch our API. So we need to go on and fetch or make the URL request. Okay, so let's first define our URL, and this is going to be our URL to fetch the data. So we'll define our URL, which is equal to this. Okay, so we need our API key, and we also need our category ID to fetch the data from the movie database. So next we are going to define, we are going to go up next, and we're going to be fetching the data from the movie database. That is what we're going to be doing. And in order for us to do that, we need to define an async function. So we're going to define an async function here, which we'll call fetch category movies. So we're going to be using the fetch API, and we're going to be passing up the URL to the fetch API, which is that. And after that, we also need to go on to await our response .json, and then we have it in our data, and we can go on to console.log data to be sure that we have our data. We're going to come over here, and I'm going to call the fetch movies function. So let's come back to application, and we have an object, and this is our result. So we have our results inside a result property in an object. So let's come back to application. We need to map. So we're going to map through what we have to create a movies. Okay, so I'm going to leave, okay, let's leave the console.log, and next we have our data.results.map. We have each movie, and you see we are using the return style again. We're going to return an object which has an ID, a name, a description, and also an image. Okay, so this image is, we are using the movie database, and we are giving it the movie.posterpath. Please, you can go on to inspect this object. So let's inspect one. You can see it has an ID, it has an overview, it has a title, and it also has a poster part, and those are the different properties that we are having access to. So we create the movies, and after creating the movies, we can obviously go on to return the movies here. So we have been able to fetch our data from the API. So after fetching our data from the API, next we need to go on to create our movie category card. Okay, we've done this in the past, so I'm just going to not explain everything that we are doing since we've done this earlier. So we have this, so we have a function which we call create movie category card, and inside it we are passing a movie category. So we intend to pass this movie into this function. Okay, so next or first we need to create our div. Okay, so I'm going to have this function which we call create element. I'm going to create a div. We're going to call this function our category card container. So if we come over to our category, is this function over here. Where is it? Here. So this function over here that we are creating. So this function, because this is the function that we are repeating. This is the div that we are repeating for our class. So we are creating this div, and up next we need to give it this class name and do what we've done before. Okay, so I'm going to go up next and give this movie the class name. So these class names that we have defined over here. Up next we need to create this other div. Okay, so that div serves as the background. So here I'm going to create the other div and give it this background, BG white, rounded LG, and P4, just as we have over here. So after that div, we need to go on and create this other div over here. Okay, so next we're going to create the other div that we have over there, and we're going to give it the class name of width full and also margin bottom 4. And inside this div we have an image. Okay, so we need to go on and create the image, give it the source property and also the alt property. So we have an image defined here. So we have created the image. The source is going to be category movie.image, which is this image over here. The alt is going to be the name, and then the class name matches this class name that we have over here. So for this, and then we append this to our category movie card image, because we have this image inside this div. So what we just did, we fixed this image inside this div. Okay, so up next we need to go on and create the title. Okay, and if we check our category HTML, this is a H3, this is the text content, so the movie title, and it has this class name. So we do that in JavaScript by creating the element H3, giving the class name, and the text content we set it to be the category name. We need to repeat the same thing for the category description. So we created a p tag, we give it the class names, and we give it the text content. So, and this is this p tag over here. Next we need to create this watch now link, but in this case we are going to actually create a button. So here we're going to create a button element. We're going to give it class names that is going to match what we have. We have a watch now text, so we're going to also have this watch now text, and if we click on it we need to go to the category movie ID page. So we're going to navigate over to this page, and now we have created all of these. We need to append them to the relative or to their relative elements. So we're going to append them to their relative elements. You can go on to visit the HTML structure to know which we append into which. And once we're done, we need to go on and return our category movie container. So we're going to come down here and make sure that we return this. So now we have, just as we did before, we have been able to fetch the data, create the card. Up next, we are going to now display our categories. So that's what we are going to be doing here. We are going to be displaying our categories, and to display our categories, we need to define a function. So I'm going to define a function which will say display category movies. And next we need to call the function that we defined at the top, which we called fetch category movies. And then we need to map, okay? Then we need to map through each movie categories as we did in the past, like this. So we are going to map through this, and Then we are going to create our category card. We are going to store it in a constant that we call movie category card. And after creating the movie category card, we now need to attach the category card onto, so let's see, we need to attach it onto this div, so category movie card container. So we need to have access to this div in our JavaScript, okay? And we need to come on top. So where we have access to this, we are also going to come here and have access to this category movie card container. And lastly, the next thing we're going to do is to go on and append the movie card to the container. So we're going to append, and then we're going to round this up by calling the display category movies. So we're going to paste this here, and we're going to call the function. And if we save this, remember that in our category HTML, we still have this. So I'm going to take this off. And now we have only this div in our category page. But I expect us to see the results of the fetch of these categories that we're fetching. So if we go back to our HTML, we can see the different movie categories that we are fetching. So these are adventure movies. If we go back to our index HTML and we click on animation movies, we fetch animation movies onto the screen coming from the movie database. So up next, we need to make the functionality of the watch now button to work, because if we click on the button, we go to the movie.html page, but we don't have that page defined. So coming back to our application, we are going to create another page. And this page is going to be for our movies. So in our movie page, I'm going to create a movie.html page. So in our movie.html page, we can call this movie page or movie details. So now we have this title. Up next, inside our body, let's go on to define the structure of our movie details page. Okay, so we are going to first have to link, just as we did, to Tailwind CSS and also have a JavaScript file. So I'm going to paste this here. This is the link to Tailwind CSS, and obviously for the JavaScript file, we are going to be linking to movie.js. We don't have this yet. We are going to define it when we move over to the JavaScript side of things. In our body tag, we are going to have a background video playing, and because of this, we are going to have relative and going to give it height screen. That's 100%, that's 100 VH. And next we need an image. So for this, I'm just going to import an image inside this directory. Okay, so I've been able to import the static folder, and inside here we just have this background mp4 movie, which is going to serve as the background for our movie details page. Just so I mentioned, this movie was actually gotten from Pixabay. Pixabay offers free movies or videos that you can use in your website. Okay, so that's where I got this video from, Pixabay. Okay, so now I've linked that. So next we have a video tag, and this video we are giving it autoplay, and this is going to make it to play whenever we load the HTML. We also have loop, and this loop property makes sure that it gets to the end and continues playing. Muted means we don't have any noise in case there are any. And then we need to a source. So this source is going to link to the static folder that we have here and over to the movie. And then the type is going to be video mp4. Okay, so after that, we need to go on to define another div. So here we have another div, and inside this div, we are going to have another enclosing div. So inside this div, we are going to have another enclosing div. Okay, and then inside this other div, we need an image. Okay, and this image is going to be coming from Unsplash. So we're going to have this image with this link. Okay, give it an alt tag and all, and then we're going to have a h2, which for now we just say movie title, and then we also going to give it a description, and this is going to be the description for now. And after the description, up next we're going to have some other details about the movie. such as the movie length. We're also going to have the director of the movie, the cast, and a watch now button. Okay, so let's save this and let's go on to our application and click on one of these. Yes, so once we click on one of these, we have our background playing, we have our card, this is our title, our description, and some details about the movie with a watch now button. So after this, let's go on and also define the JavaScript for our HTML. So at the root folder, I'm going to have our movie.js file, and this movie.js file should already be linked to our HTML over here. So in the movie.js file, we need the movie ID, and we are going to do what we did before. We are going to take it from the URL, and next we need our API key to make us to be able to send API request. I'm going to have our API key over there. Next, we're going to get some details about the movie. So the movie title, the movie image, the movie description, and the watch now button. Okay, so these are going to give us access to the different DOM elements. So we need to make sure in your HTML that you have an ID of movie title for the title of the movie. So for the H2, so movie title. For the image, you should have an ID of movie image. For the description, we should have movie description, and for the watch now button, we have this over here. So we are having access to them in our JavaScript. So next we need to go on to fetch the movie details. Okay, so I'm just going to put this over here. We are going to be using not async await. We are just going to be using fetch. We hit the URL, giving it the movie ID and also the API key, and then we get our response. We convert response.json, and then we await this, and then we have our actual data. And getting our actual data, we set the text content of the movie title, the movie description, and also the movie source, as you have seen us do before. And in case of errors, we just go on to log the errors to the console. So what we're trying to do now is, once we load the page, we are going to be fetching the data that's for title, image, and description for that particular movie. We're going to save this and come back to our HTML. That means we no longer need to hard code this data. We no longer need to hard code this movie title over here, and we no longer need to hard code this image source as we did before, because all these are going to be set. We can even take it off. Okay, so we're going to have this. So we keep the class name, we keep the alt, but the source is going to be set from our JavaScript. So I'm going to save this, and if we go back to our file, we have the name, we have the description, we have the image. So this API don't return things like the movie length, the director, and the cast. So we just leave this as hard-coded data for now. Okay, and let's try to go back to another movie. So if we come back and try to load this movie, we have the movie image, we have the name, and we also have the description about the movie. So now let's go on to make the watch now button to work. In order for us to make the watch now button to work, we need to have let's see, I'm going to collapse this, and outside this we need to have a modal. Okay, because that's the intention. We need to have a modal, and I'm just going to paste the modal over here. First we need a backdrop. Okay, we need a backdrop, and I'm going to paste this over here. So this just has a fixed position, is hidden initially, so you need to take note of this hidden class, because we're going to toggle this class in JavaScript. So this is it, it's hidden, and it has all this has Z index, background, and opacity, and most importantly it has an ID of modal backdrop. Okay, so after this backdrop, let's go on to build our modal. So this is the HTML for our modal, and our modal has this class name of modal container. So this is the modal container, and in it we have the modal content, and inside the modal content we just have this, and this links to an iframe, which links to a YouTube video, my YouTube video. So we are not actually playing a real movie. And then we have a close button over here to close the modal, which is just an SVG. So let's save this. If you can also take notice, the modal has a class of hidden. Okay, the backdrop is hidden, the modal is hidden. So if we should go to our HTML, we see nothing. But if we take off this hidden class from the backdrop and the modal, if we should save and go back to our application, we can see that we have our backdrop, which is this, and we have our modal. So you can go on to play this tutorial, and obviously do subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. So you can go on to cancel this movie, but for now none of this works. The cancel button nor playing the movie would work. I would not go on to play. It's gonna work, and you can see that the modal, the backdrop is still there. So we're going to toggle this in our JavaScript. So let's keep it hidden, because initially we want it to be hidden until the user clicks on this watch now button. So we need to be watching out for clicks on the watch now button. So coming to our movie.js file, let's go on and have access to the watch now button. So this button over here is responsible for that. As you can see, we have it has an ID of watch now button. So we are going to have access to it by, so we already have access to it by watch now, with this watch now button. And next we need to add an event listener. So we're going to say the watch now button dot add event listener is going to be a click event. So whenever that button gets clicked, we want to execute a function, and we need to do two things. So we need to remove this class list. So so we need to remove this class list from, where is it? This hidden. So we need to remove this class, and we also need to remove this class from the backdrop and also from our modal. So how are we going to do that? We are going to say, first we need to have access to the backdrop and also to the modal container. Okay, so we're going to have access to it by using getElementById, modal container, and modal backdrop. So this gives us access to the modal container and the backdrop. And then we're going to say modal container, we can start with the backdrop, dot class list. And the class list we need to remove, and we're going to remove hidden. Okay, and the same thing happens to, now not the backdrop, but our modal container, like this. So we're going to remove the hidden class. And if we save this, go back to application, and we click on the watch now button, we can see that the modal appears, and also with the backdrop. But now clicking out doesn't have any effect. So I'm going to come over to also watch out for clicks on this button, on this close button, which has an ID of modal close. Okay, so let's import that button into our HTML, into our JavaScript. I've imported the button, and the next thing is we're also going to add an event listener to the modal close button. Okay, so initially we removed the hidden class, but this time around we are going to be adding the hidden class. Okay, once we click on the button, we need to add it back to this element. So I'm going to take these two elements, but instead of use remove, we are going to be adding this time around. Okay, so now backdrop, we are going to add the hidden class and also the hidden class to our modal container. Remember that these are Tailwind stylings, and adding them is going to give it a display of hidden. So that's the CSS property, display hidden. And by default, it has a display of block. So it's going to be showing to the on the DOM. Okay, so if we go back to our application, we click on the watch now button, we click on this, it cancels it. Okay, and if we go over to our index.html, we reload our page. You can see that we have our different categories. So in case you want to watch an action movie, you can click on explore. This is going to show you the different action movies. Maybe you're interested in this action movie and you want to watch now. You can click on the watch now button. This takes you to the movie. You have the image, you have the name, it gives you a brief description. For now, the length, director, and cast, they are hard-coded data. And maybe you have, or you're authorized to play the movie, and you click on watch now, you can go on to watch the movie. Okay, so that's it guys for our application, as simple as it is. Obviously there are some improvements that you can do on this application, like you can obviously make the new releases to work, and you can also make the top picks to work. So that's it guys. for this tutorial. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Bye bye.